Here at the Alan Turing Institute, our mission is to make great leaps in data science and artificial intelligence research in order to change the world for the better.
This podcast explores the research, ideas and technologies behind the data revolution with the people responsible for shaping our future.
Welcome to the Turing Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Turing Podcast, and today we are doing a special episode because as girls took over, there's no Ed because it's International Women's Day, and we're just gonna chat a little bit about that. So my co-hosts today are Rachel and Joe. Hi girls.
Hi.
Hey. How are you doing? How are you, Rachel?
I'm good, thanks. Very excited for an International Women's Day episode and also taking control of the podcast from Ed.
Exactly.
One episode.
How are you, Joe? How are you doing?
I'm good. Also very excited for this podcast and our amazing guest that we've got lined up. Very excited.
That is true, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. For now, we're going to talk about how this year's theme is hashtag choose to challenge. So the International Women's Day is has a theme that we are going to challenge gender bias and inequality. So instead of having a game today, we've decided we're going to talk about what we personally, each of us, want to challenge and continue to challenge. So Rachel, do you want to get started?
Yeah, sure. So this is a slight little plug for my other podcast project that's just starting. So me and a couple of girls I work with from the civil service have decided to set up a podcast called STEMinist Stories, which is all about women in STEM who aren't really talked about or acknowledged for their contributions. So there's always like the general women who are talked about, like Marie Curie and things like that, who obviously did a lot for science, and people like Ava Lovelace did a lot for computing. There's a lot of other women who aren't really talked about. So I guess my sort of I challenge theme for the year is to kind of start talking about women's stories in STEM who aren't really covered that much, and they're like amazing contributions to science. So I'm very excited because it's basically an excuse to really nerd out on all this stuff for the next 12 months.
Well, it sounds really exciting, and all our listeners, here is the plug for Rachel's new podcast. How about you, Joe? Do you want to tell us what you're challenging?
Sure. So I actually have two because there is so much to challenge. So my first one, I suppose, is a bit of a broad technology-related challenge. So I'm challenging the fact that we are living in a society which is increasingly shaped by technology. However, the people creating that technology are not representative of everyone that will be using it. So, the idea of the fact that we need more female creators and, other kind of minority groups creating that technology that we're all going to be using and that is already shaping our lives. And I suppose another one, which is not technology related, which has been, I think, highlighted by the pandemic, is the fact that mothers are still very underappreciated by society, and the fact that caring duties within the last year have predominantly fallen to women. So obviously that, is care of children, but also caring of, other people in society. And I think we really need to look at what that means, like economically, but also for progression in society as well for women. So those are my two for today.
Oh, thank you. Mine is a bit more specific because I don't know if I've mentioned it here on the podcast, but I'm from Portugal, and I feel that Portugal, even though it's having a lot of progress, it's still a little bit far behind on equality and gender balance, as particularly in technology. I give an example on the podcast when we talked to our guests, and it was a conference that happened in Portugal 10 years ago. So it's not even that long ago. And the truth is that there's still a lot to do, and there's a lot of initiatives in Portugal going around, and I'm going to try to be more active in them and more participant. And, well, who knows? Maybe even do a little bit of comedy if I try to. So, dear listeners, please keep in mind, what do you want to challenge this year? If you are a misogynist, then maybe you shouldn't be listening to us, because we do not condone you. But if you're not, look around you and see what you can challenge and how you can keep an eye open to inequality and unconscious bias, because unfortunately it's everywhere. So I guess we're going to now go to our let's go to our podcast. Jo, do you want to tell us who is coming today?
Yeah, so very excitingly, we spoke to Professor Sue Black on lots of different things. She told us about her inspirational story, and the conversation progressed from there. So, yeah, enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Turing podcast. I'm Jo, and I'm in the communications team, and I'm here with my co-host B. And this week, we're incredibly excited to be joined by Professor Sue Black. So let me give a little introduction to Sue in case you haven't heard of her, which I'd be surprised about. So Sue is a professor of computer science and technology evangelist at Durham University. She has set up initiatives such as BCS Women and the social enterprise Tech Mums to encourage more women into computing. She's also instrumental in the campaign to save Bletchley Park.
This isn't... Hi, Sue.
Hi.
This isn't the first time that
you're...
This isn't the first time that you're actually involved with the Turing, right? You previously delivered the Turing lecture. If I could do it, so can you? Where you told the community all about your inspirational story, and also you ran a Tech Mums workshop, which sounds really cool. So welcome to the podcast, and we're going to pick your brain on a few things.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, that was in Newcastle maybe 2 years ago now, I think. And so I guess, I like talking. Well, do I like talking about it? I talk about my challenges and stuff that I've managed to overcome in my life, because I just want everyone to kind of get out there and live their best life, I guess. And whatever I can do to help encourage people to get out there and kind of go for it, then I suppose I spend quite a lot of time doing that these days.
Which is, absolutely fantastic. And I think, I kind of gave a very whistle-stop tour of kind of, a few career highlights for you there. But I suppose for anyone at home that's maybe less familiar with your kind of career journey and kind of how you've got to where you are now, it'd be great if you could maybe talk about that if you're happy to.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so, I guess I come from like an average family, mum, dad, brother and sister who are twins and 5 years younger than me. But unfortunately, when I was 12, my mum died. My dad remarried quite quickly, possibly to the wrong person. And my life kind of went from living in a functional family to living in a dysfunctional family. So I was quite depressed for most of the time between like 13 and 16, and basically left home as soon as I could. Moved in with my friend's family, stayed there for a year, and then moved to London. So we were out in Essex. And worked in various jobs, which I enjoyed. Then got married at 20. Had my first daughter at 21, and then I thought, well, I'll have another baby, and then I'll go back to work. That other baby turned out to be twin boys, so I had them when I was 23. And then, unfortunately, about a year and a half after that, my marriage broke down. So we ended up having to leave where we were living. Early one morning because my ex-husband threatened to kill us all. So we all had to run away, lived in women's refuge for 6 months, and then kind of started life again in Brixton in London on a council estate. And I got my my daughter, who was then 4, into school, like into reception, got the boys into playgroup. And then I thought to myself, so, what am I going to do now? This is not the situation. This is not the life that, this is what I expected my life to be like, really. And I thought about going back to work, but then realised that I left school at 16 with 5 O-levels, and that was now sort of 10 years previously. And I realised that I probably wouldn't be able to get a job that, above minimum wage, really. I'd probably be working in a supermarket. So with 3 small children, I wouldn't even be able to earn enough to pay for childcare. So I realised going back to work wasn't an option. Thought about going back to studying. I hadn't wanted to leave school when I was 16, which I had to at the time. So, I'd always wanted to go to university. So I thought, well, let me see what options are available to kind of get back into education. Went along to the local college, Southwark College in London, and met an amazing tutor, Willie Taylor there, who told me all about this maths course they had called Polymaths, which just was 6 hours a week in the classroom and 20 hours a week private study. So that meant that I just had to get, I had to get a babysitter for 2 nights a week, but which was manageable. And I could do the studying like when the kids were asleep in the evening, or when they were sort of in childcare. So did that course for a year and then applied to study computing at South Bank Uni. That was really hard to start with because I had to take the kids to school, drop them off at 9, get to uni at 10, leave at 2 to pick them up at 3:15. So particularly the first year was really difficult because I felt like I missed half the lectures and stuff. But, I made friends and friends picked up the notes for me because back in the old days we had like paper copies of notes that the lecturers would give out. I think we needed to get 50% to get through the first year, and I think I got 52 or something like that. So I scraped through the first year, but then gradually things got easier and easier. And in the end, I got a 2-1 in computing, which was great. And then in the final year of my degree project supervisor said to me, "What do you think about doing a PhD?" So I said, "Oh, I'd love to do a PhD," but actually I didn't know what a PhD was. I just pretended that I did. But then when I went to the library afterwards because we didn't have mobile phones on the internet then. Went to the library and looked up what is a PhD. And when I saw that it was doing research and, blah, 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 I just thought, oh, actually, I'd love to do a PhD. I really would love to do a PhD. So then interviewed, got a position to do a PhD in software engineering. And, well, that took me 7 years, but I got it eventually. And during that time, became a full-time lecturer at the uni. So I had, like, in quotes, a proper job as well. Maybe I'll pause there. I feel like I'll talk forever if you let me wind me up and I get going.
No, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's so many, you've overcome so many challenges, and it's incredible. So what I want to know is, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back? At what age would you go, and what would you tell her?
Wow. Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, all the time. So I feel like I was very, very like underconfident when I was younger. I was very shy. I kind of had this self-belief, but at the same time would never kind of like argue any case with anybody. I would just kind of like take what anyone else said as being the truth or the best thing to do. I think, really, I would love to know that actually I was having opinions that were valid and valuable. And, I just didn't have the confidence to share them. And so I think it would be around kind of trusting your gut instincts. I think particularly as a young woman, quite a lot of the time, your contributions aren't as valued as they should be potentially in society in general. And, I really feel like, I'd love to tell myself that, my opinions were valid and valuable, and that I could have a successful career and I could be a successful person. And I would be able to kind of overcome lots of challenges. I thought when I was younger that everyone else was having a great time and I was having a terrible time, and like, why was it just me? But
and you didn't have Instagram, because now everyone has Instagram, so it's even worse.
We didn't even have the internet. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think everyone gets challenging times in their life, and I didn't know that. I thought it was just me, and I think if I'd known that other people were going through difficult things, but potentially just not talking about them, then I would have not felt, I think I kind of really felt like I was different in that I was having a terrible time. But in fact, there were so many people having a terrible time. And, because it's pre-internet, my information, I didn't have the internet to see what was happening, no social media, no internet. You couldn't really see what was happening to people all around the world. Like even down the road, let alone around the world. And people didn't really talk about things then as much as we do now as well, like share information about themselves. So, yeah, again, I could talk about this forever, but I guess that's the main points I really covered there.
Yeah, I think it's so true, isn't it? I mean, if the more people share and the more people kind of understand other people's positions and experiences, then I think everyone feels a little bit less alone in their own situation, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and a big part of your kind of career has obviously been campaigning, for more support for women in tech and academia. And you've obviously founded some initiatives around that. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about kind of the initiatives themselves, like Tech Mums, BCS Women? And, what was your thinking of setting those up? Like, was it, support groups, like information sharing? I'm so interested in that element of your career.
Sure, thank you. No, I think I'm going to set up BS Women now.
Yeah, I think that's a great name.
The three of us are going to found out after this podcast, BS Women. So BCS Women kind of came about because, when I was a PhD student, I guess when I was doing my degree, I think it was about 90% guys and 10% women. And to be honest, I don't think I ever really thought much about the fact that I was in a minority there or anything like that. Because I had loads of friends in the class, and it just, as far as I can remember anyway, it didn't really seem to be an issue. And I didn't kind of think about myself as a woman in computing or a woman in tech. And it wasn't really till I was doing my PhD when my PhD supervisor said to me, when you go to conferences, you've got to network with people, because it's not just what you know, it's who you know, which is true. What you know is important, but it's good to network and kind of make friends with people as well. And so, when I went to my first conference, again, I was really shy. So I just thought, I've got to network. That's like the worst thing that anyone can ask me to do ever. I'm dreading it, but I've been told I should do it, so I'm going to do it. The first conference I went to, there was a guy who gave a sort of really down-to-earth talk, seemed quite funny. So I thought, okay, he's quite approachable. I'll chat to him in the break. He can be my one person that I'm going to talk to at this conference. And so I went up to chat to him in the break, and we had a great chat over a cup of tea or coffee. But then, which was fine. And then for the rest of the conference, though, every time I turned around, he was staring at me, and I couldn't work out why he was staring at me. And I just thought, what did I say that was so wrong that you're just staring at me all the time? So, of course, I don't think I said anything wrong now looking back. But I really didn't, I was very, I don't know what you'd call it, but, I wasn't confident and I guess socially naive or something. I didn't quite know what had gone wrong there. And I just thought, well, it was me, I did something wrong. And so now he's staring at me and I don't know why. So then the next conference I went to, tried the same kind of thing again. And ended up trying to chat to two guys. So we're just kind of like standing at a table as you do with a cup of tea. So I said something like, like my amazing kind of starting conversation lines was something like, so how did you find the last session? Or, something like that at a conference. And both the guys looked at me and then looked at each other and just started chatting with each other and completely left me out the conversation. So I stood there feeling like a right lemon, thinking, what do I do now? Like, I just had no clue what to do. So I was mortified, obviously. And I just felt like I don't comprehend what's going on. Why is this happening? Like, I don't understand it. And again, I thought maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I just didn't really know what to do. So that's why I went into the loos and just sat on the loo and started crying, thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do this? So I had this kind of like terrible complex about my lack of ability at networking. And then in 98, so it's maybe, I don't know, it's probably like the fifth or sixth conference I went to, was a Women in Science conference. I remember walking into the conference in Brussels thinking to myself, oh God, here we go, networking. I'm terrible at it. I wonder what's going to happen this time. And went to the registration desk, picked up my badge, went over to get a cup of tea. And the whole 2 days of the conference flew by, and I felt like everyone was chatting to everyone. And so that kind of really helped me to realize that it wasn't me necessarily, and that if you're in the majority, life is just easier, and you don't realize till you're in both of those kind of situations. And I hadn't really thought about I was a woman and it was about 10% women at the previous conferences. It honestly, I don't think really occurred to me, but it wasn't until I was in a mainly in the majority in a women focused conference and had such a different experience that I realized that, and I'd just not had that realization before. So that conference changed my life. And when I came back, I kind of took steps to set up BCS Women, so the British Computer Society Women's Network, which turned out to be the first online network for women in tech in the UK. Just because mainly I wanted to connect women together so that we could just chat about technology, chat about computing, meet each other, and just kind of like support and encourage each other. And that's kind of how it started, and I mean, it's still going strong now. And that's now 23 years ago. I can't believe it's 23 years, but it is. So that's how BCS Women came about. And then Tech Mums came about because about 10 years ago, I'd just finished running the campaign to save Bletchley Park, and I guess I was looking for something else to do, I don't know, outside my day job. And I kind of was thinking back over the years and thinking about how technology and education massively changed my life and my life chances and my family's life as well, because I was able to get a job where I could earn, a reasonable amount of money. And so I don't know if you can hear the banging, but we've got builders on the roof, so apologies for that.
It's actually okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So Tech Mums came about because I'd finished campaigning to save Bletchley Park, so that was over. And I realised how technology and education had made a massive difference to my life. And at that time, so it's about 2012, I think, Michael Gove was the education secretary, and he was saying that computing was too difficult for anyone under 14. And I just thought, oh, that's a load of rubbish. But I wanted to kind of try and prove it, I think. So started running workshops with 7-year-old kids. So my youngest daughter was 7 at the time. So I just thought, she can do stuff in tech, or computing. I'm sure she can. So ran workshops for her age children. So doing stuff like app design with Apps for Good and programming in Scratch and using Raspberry Pis and programming in Python. And so running these workshops, and the kids absolutely loved it and had a great time and could do it. And so computing is not too difficult for anyone under 14, which I know that's true. But that was kind of like a bit of the pervasive attitude at the time. And so at the end of the day, when we'd run these workshops, we'd get the parents to come in and see what the kids had been doing, because I wanted to get them involved as well. And in general, so not everyone, but in general, when we asked the parents to get involved, the dads would kind of like step forward because they had like Raspberry Pis and monitors and stuff in front of them. The dads would kind of step forward and have a look at what the kids were doing. And like a few of the mums just looked very apprehensive and like I really don't want to do this kind of look on their faces. And that just sparked a thought in my head, why don't I try and put something together to teach mums tech skills, to help them see what opportunities are out there. And then if the mums get it, then of course the kids will get it, and they'll provide a supportive environment for the kids too. So then I started putting together a program of stuff like the kids have been doing. So like app design, a bit of coding in Python, web design, how to stay safe online, how to use social media and stuff like that. So I put that program together. Around that time, I found out that there was some research which showed that the key positive influencing factors on kids doing well at school at age 11 were their mum's education and their home environment. So I just thought, like there's so many reasons why teaching mums tech skills is such a good idea, because it's great for the mums, but it's also great for the kids and great for the family. So that started running in Tower Hamlets back in 2013. And we had great success straight away, really, with, mums. We had Brunel University put together a research framework to measure the mums' attitudes towards themselves and towards technology. As they went through the program, we found that their attitude towards technology improved. So they became more confident with technology, more positive about technology. But the main difference actually was that the mums' general self-esteem, so how they felt about themselves, changed really dramatically. And so that was a real eye-opener for me. I mean, it's obvious, like as soon as I knew it, it was obvious, but it's not what I'd thought about when I was putting the program together, in that if in quite a short amount of time you can learn to do stuff which you just thought you would never be able to do, of course that's going to improve your confidence in yourself. So that was amazing, and Tech Mums has been running since then. And so we've gone a bit quiet this last year with COVID, because particularly with mums kind of at the beginning of their tech adventure, I suppose, meeting up in person is quite critical, really, to help people kind of, not one-to-one, but, to get some quick feedback on how to do things. And it's quite hard to do that online, really. But we're looking forward to getting going as soon as lockdown finishes.
This is such a good way to go into my next question. But first of all, thank you so much for telling us about all of those stories, and it still happens. It still happened to me, and I'm a different generation, about going to a tech conference and being one of the very few women. There's only one advantage. I keep saying it on some of my routines, which is you don't have, lines to the restroom. But other than that, there's nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So it's still happening to you as a PhD student,
It still happened to me about 10 years ago at the first conference that I went to.
Okay.
It was 800 participants and 20 women.
Wow.
So it was a bit of a ratio, but I thought you would like to know that it happened also quite recently. Yeah. But my question is, needs a bit of an intro, because this podcast is going to come out around the Women's International Day. And this year, the challenge, the topic, the theme is choose to challenge. Yeah. And the truth is that this past year has been one of the most challenging years in modern society. And inequality has been heightened by the pandemic. Like, if it existed before, now it's even more blatant. In particular, like you said, you already mentioned how the pandemic affected having engagement of women with tech mums. What do you think we can do to make sure that these discrepancies and inequalities are eliminated, and this doesn't repeat in a potential future crisis?
Wow, that's a big question to answer. Well, I guess, I think, we have to kind of accept, really, that we all have unconscious bias and that our society is biased. And I think we all just have to accept that that's how it is and how we are, and then work together to kind of take steps towards trying to make society how we want it to be, not how it's been in the past. And so I think just accepting that, like organisations accepting that, all accepting that we don't get everything right all the time, and we're going to make some mistakes as well. And then, working together to put together programs which will help change things and to address things like the gender pay gap, which is ludicrous. It's still ludicrous. It's been highlighted as an issue for I don't know how many years, years and years and years. And yet, we're still not there at gender parity, even though everyone knows that it's an issue, and it just takes people working together and accepting that it's the right thing to do, and then just getting on and doing it. So, I think with the kind of choose to challenge thing, we should all challenge ourselves and each other to just start taking steps to work together to sort things out which aren't fair.
Yeah, and I think it's been, I was reading an article just before this around, women taking on, already taking on lots of the caring duties, but, particularly with things like homeschooling and, it's something that, I hope that we haven't kind of regressed, but equally it's, it seems to be predominantly women that have taken on those responsibilities during this pandemic, which makes progression really, really difficult. And I think it's, got a long way to go.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's not like it's an unsolvable or they are unsolvable problems.
Exactly.
We can solve them. So we just need to accept their problems and just get on and solve them. So, I think that is the challenge. We all recognise that now. And, we know where the areas of issue are. So why aren't we just getting on and sorting them out?
Yeah, I suppose it's one thing, isn't it, to talk about them and raise awareness, but actually change comes when action happens. And policy changes happen, don't they?
Absolutely. It's like, so when I was younger, I was really not in favour of quotas and stuff like that. But the older I get, the more radical I get. I guess because I'd seen that, like from setting up BCS Women, that's 23 years ago. So a whole generation ago, I set up that network to support women. And I think the percentage of women in tech then was like 15 to 20%. So it's still 15 to 20%. And so some things have moved on in that, we all now really have much more of an understanding of sort of diversity and inclusion of all sorts. And companies are taking steps towards making sure that they're inclusive and stuff like that. But it shouldn't take a whole generation just to move things on a bit. That's just wrong. And, like the older I get, the more I think, wow, so these problems won't probably be sorted out in my lifetime, because that's a whole generation now from me being in my 20s and 30s to my 50s. If things haven't moved that much now, so then it's like, am I just going to end up retired or dying? And all these issues are still around. To me, that just makes me feel very twitchy and just want to get on and make things happen. And we shouldn't have to wait generations for these sort of things. If we realise there are problems, we should just get on and start sorting them out. And I get, the older I get, the more radical I get as well in terms of just wanting to sort stuff out and make things happen.
Yeah, I suppose, it's kind of the proactive element of like so many people, they just kind of want to, if a job isn't being done properly, like let's just sort it out ourselves. And I think, do you kind of have one? I guess there isn't a one solution to anything, but if you had to kind of narrow down what is like the biggest barrier to women going into tech or computing, what would you say it would be? Do you think?
You just can't say that there's one, because there's lots. And a lot of it is our society and the way we still bring up girls to not really think that science or tech is a great career, and unfortunately it's still happening. And it is part of our society that we just in general see things like that. And, we've got to really tackle that in a multitude of ways, really. So like one of the things we've done at Durham recently is run a program called Tech Up Women. And that's the aim of that is to provide a pathway to women to be able to retrain into tech careers. Because I think for a long time, we've kind of had this idea that, you study subjects at school, then maybe go to uni, and then that's your subject area for life. Whereas, I just think we've moved so far away from that. You don't need to just be in one job for your whole career. You can retrain in weeks or months and then do almost a completely different job. And potentially you can have a portfolio career, right? You can have several different job roles, and we're not all just good at one thing and that's it. That's just not, it's a very sort of reductive way of looking at human ability, I suppose. And so we put together a program called Tech Up Women. So we work with 15 industry partners and 3 other universities and put together a program to retrain women, particularly from underserved backgrounds, from the Midlands and the North, into tech careers. And we asked the industry partners, where are your skill shortages? What job roles do you want to employ women into? And so, they told us that. And then we put together a program together which took women with degrees from sort of computer science 101 through to being able to apply for jobs in tech. So the top 4 roles were software developer, agile project manager, business analyst, and data scientist. So we created a course which went from computer science 101 through to those pathways and then into a job in tech. And so that's a 6-month, mainly online part-time course. And so we need things like, we need lots of pathways for women into tech careers, but also people from underserved communities. And people, that maybe haven't had the best chances in life to be able to train into technology, because, tech's the biggest growing sector, and it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing till basically everything is tech or involves tech. And so, I just think there's no reason to not really train into technology, because you're going to have a job for life probably, and B, you're going to earn a reasonable amount of money, and so that's one solution. There are lots of other things that need to happen. I mean, companies really need to sort out the gender pay gap within their organizations. Of course, that needs to happen. And well, I think, all of us kind of working at home for a year has shown that we don't all need to be in an office 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 every day. So that's another thing which potentially could benefit women or people, who aren't able to travel into an office for 9 to 5 every day. So I think actually there are some benefits from the last year, just in terms of organisations realising that they don't have to have everyone behind a desk all in the same place from 9 to 5 every day. And of course, they'll save money now by not paying ridiculous amounts for buildings to house hundreds or thousands of people, when they could actually, lots of them could just work from home. So I forgot what the question was now.
That's okay. It was like a natural progression. So I think my question, wasn't it? And I think, it's really interesting. You commented about kind of girls seeing it as an industry or a career path, or just seeing how they fit into that landscape. And I think, like earlier on, you mentioned Apps for Good, and I actually used to work for Apps for Good a couple of years ago. And there are fantastic initiatives, I suppose, to show children, this is an industry that exists, and there is a place for you in it. I mean, one thing I've kind of thought about with the pandemic, and maybe not specifically tech, but kind of more science or STEM, do you think there's going to be the kind of pandemic has maybe sparked interest in going into that kind of career, because it's just been around us all the time for the last year, and it's something that science has never been more talked about, has it really?
Yeah, true. Well, hopefully. I mean, I think, being at home has enabled us all to, I guess we've kind of, maybe our culture will have changed slightly because of, what's happened. I kind of, I think about it as kind of our generation. Well, I know we're not the same generation, but, our generation's kind of World War II, because I know, like, when I used to chat to my grandparents, lots of the time they would talk about what happened in the war, because it was just so dramatically different to kind of our everyday life. And I kind of feel like, since then, this is probably the biggest thing that's happened to change the way that we see ourselves and see the world, because it's such a kind of dramatically different from everyday life, like the vaccines. I mean, it's such a massive story. And I had my first one a couple of weeks ago, which I'm delighted about. So yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that will encourage loads of kids to go into science, hopefully, because they'll be able to see, like on the news practically every day, that the numbers of people dying from COVID will be dropping. And a lot of that will be down to us all, well, a large proportion of us getting the vaccine. And so absolutely, it's a great science story to encourage kids to go into science. So I think definitely that. What I think a lot of the time kids don't realise that they're using technology all the time. And I think we still kind of have a bit of a stereotype of jobs in technology as some guy in a hoodie kind of sitting in the corner programming. And, that's not what a job in tech looks like for probably like 98% of the jobs in tech, I think. And, I'd still like kids to really realise that there's all sorts of jobs in technology, just so many. And they're using technology all the time. Like my 17-year-old daughter is on TikTok and Instagram all day, practically, like every day when she's not at school, and that, to me, that's great that she's got that, because she can connect with people through social media. She can find stuff out for her A-levels. And what I really want kids to realize is that they can be part of creating that technology, not just using it. And I think, that's something that we need to get over to kids, is that creating that tech is a kind of an amazing thing that they can be part of. And I think one of the great things about technology is the people aspect, really. And particularly, now that we've got all types of social media and the internet, connecting people together helps us to solve problems. And I think, as time goes on and we all connect more with each other, we can connect around solving specific problems. Because I think a lot of the solutions are out there, but we're just, because we're traditionally being kind of quite siloed, I suppose, or like in our bubbles. I think social media and now the pandemic has actually helped people to connect kind of across connect in different ways that they maybe wouldn't have done before. And so, I think we really need to tell kids that, the more they understand about technology, the more they connect with other people through tech, the more they'll be able to solve the world's biggest challenges, like poverty and homelessness. And, I'm sure those problems can be solved. And I think technology enabling us to connect together with people who can then work together on the solutions is the way forward.
Definitely. And I think the kind of creative element of technology is the thing that often is just not really talked about. The creative industries are seen as a separate thing, whereas actually, technology is incredibly creative. And as you said, you have to use problem solving, you have to use all sorts of skills. So I think it's hopefully.
Most of us still wear hoodies every day and work in a corner, but that doesn't change too much. So you've talked about all of these, like for young people and things, but do you have any advice specifically to women that are starting their career now and they want to do it in science?
Well, I think just get out there and go for it, really, and find your group of people, find your tribe or your group of people who will support you through, your journey. So it sounds like a cliche, but it really is true. Like I couldn't do anything I've done without the people I've got around me, people I've met along the way, people that have supported me, mentored me, kind of advocated for me in various different ways. And so, I've got, my supervisor, my PhD supervisor telling me to network at conferences and that being awful. That's now one of my favorite things to do, is to meet new people. And even like, online, I've been meeting people through introductions and chatting to people in online conferences and stuff. So, you can still do it online, even if we're not meeting up in person. And I think building that support group around yourself, really, to help you get through the challenges that come is my best advice, really, and just go for it.
Right. And I suppose kind of on the flip side of that, if you kind of had organization in front of you, like what would you say to them to encourage more women into their workforce?
Well, I mean, I think hard about your culture and do your best to make sure that it's woman friendly, but also inclusive for everybody within the organization, because organizations that really focus on making sure that their culture is inclusive for everyone will be attractive to all sorts of people. And so, I think that's the best place to start. And then once you feel like your culture is like that, then promote yourselves to the outside world and people will want to work for you.
Thank you so much for answering. I feel like I'm just listening to you, and then I was just thank you so much.
Welcome.
But the truth is, okay, we're talking to you from the Turing, and you already mentioned it briefly, but we can't speak with you today without discussing your work on the campaign to save Bletchley Park.
Oh yeah.
So because it's just we had to. So could you tell us a little bit of what led you to get involved with this campaign and how everything happened?
Sure. So I talked about when I was doing my PhD, I set up BCS Women in 98. Well, in 2003, I got invited up to a meeting at Bletchley Park. I'd never been there before. And like on the way there, I was thinking to myself, what is Bletchley Park? And like all I could think of, all that I knew really was it was where the code breakers worked during the Second World War. And for some reason in my head, I had this kind of picture of like about 50 middle-aged men, like wearing tweed jackets, smoking pipes and doing the Times crossword and maybe a bit of code breaking on the side. So I don't know where that image came from. But that was it, So I got there, went to the meeting and then went for a walk around afterwards and ended up going into one of the blocks there and bumping into these guys that were rebuilding Turing's bomb machine. And, I didn't know about Turing's bomb machine at all. I'd never heard of it. So I just saw these guys kind of tinkering away on what looked like this amazing, massive feat of engineering. And I just didn't know what it was. So I went over to find out and talked to them about that. And they told me about, Turing and the bomb and the industrialization of the code breaking process. And I got very excited about that. And then they asked me why I was there. So I said, I'm representing this group of women in computing, BCS women. And John, the guy that I was chatting to, said, did you know that more than half of the people that worked at Bletchley Park were women? So I was like, no, I had no idea about that at all. Because as far as I knew, it was 50-old blokes. And I said, how many people worked here? And he said, more than 10,000. So I was completely blown away. And it turned out it was about 8,000 women that worked at Bletchley Park and the outstations. So about 80% women. And, that I'd not seen anything about that anywhere at all. So that time I went away and managed to get some funding to run an oral history project to capture the memories of the women that worked at Bletchley Park. Because I wanted to capture their memories and for everyone to know, about the women's contribution. So that it took a few years to get a bit of funding and then to run, to interview the women and stuff. So then it was 2008 at the launch of that project that Simon Greenish, who was the director of Bletchley Park at the time, said that in his talk he was really worried that Bletchley Park might have to close. The visitor numbers were dropping. He said they were teetering on a financial knife edge and that if they closed, they probably wouldn't be able to open again. So he was really worried that Bletchley Park might basically close down. So I thought to myself, well, that's terrible. Like that can't happen. But I didn't really do anything about it. And then I think a couple of months after that, I was invited up to Bletchley Park and for the first time did a full tour of the site with one of the veterans that had worked there. And he was telling us about all these amazing code-breaking achievements kind of as we walked around the site in all the different huts and stuff. And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. I didn't know anything about any of these stories. And at the end of the tour, he said, and the work that was done here was said to have shortened World War II by 2 years. And at that time, 11 million people a year were dying. So I just stood there thinking, so this place saved 22 million lives and it might have to close. That's ridiculous. I've got to do something about it. So by then I was head of department at the University of Westminster, which meant that I was on an email list for all the heads and professors of computing in the country, CPHC. And so I emailed everyone saying, we've got to say Bletchley Park. Simon Greenish sent me a link to a petition that was on the 10 Downing Street website, which someone else had set up asking the government to say Bletchley Park. So I sent that around and looked at the petition a few hours later. And, I could see all these like really famous professors of computing from around the UK that had signed the petition because I'd sent that email. And I got lots of emails back from heads and professors saying, that they supported what I wanted to do. And then we wrote a letter to the Times and that went into the paper in July 2008. And also I contacted all the journalists that I knew, which was about 3, so it wasn't very many, but luckily one of them was Rory Keflin-Jones, who got back to me and he interviewed me at Bletchley Park in July 2008 saying things like, I'm ashamed to be British, why don't we look after our heritage? And that went on BBC News that day and was like front page of the BBC website. So that was all very exciting. That kind of happened within a week, really, of me starting. I didn't even realise I was starting a campaign at the beginning. What turned into it, but it turned into a campaign. And I got lots of emails from people all around the world saying they supported Bletchley Park. And that was great, including a couple of code breakers. But I didn't, nothing much really changed. Like Bletchley Park wasn't saved. It was just there were lots of people who were interested. But Bletchley Park still needed money. And so it wasn't really till the end of 2008 when I started really playing around with Twitter So I signed up for Twitter in 2007 and basically thought, what is this rubbish? I just didn't know how to use it at all. And then in 2008, I saw some other people using it and got them to show me what they were doing. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing.
Yeah, I get it.
And I realized, I think we all have right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I realized quite quickly that I could just type Bletchley Park into the search box in Twitter and find everyone in the world that was talking about Bletchley Park and connect with them sometimes and have almost real-time conversations with them. So that was incredible. And then I'd set up a blog called Saving Bletchley Park, which is still there, which kind of tells the story of what we did. So I set up the blog, was using Twitter. So yeah, that was amazing. I put the link for the blog in my Twitter profile. Various people got in touch with me through Twitter saying they wanted to help Bletchley Park. So in that January, we went to one of the code breakers. Captain Jerry Roberts was giving a talk at UCL, so we went along to that, me and some other people from Twitter. And then the next day we went up to Bletchley Park itself, and I took everyone around. Well, Simon took everyone around and kind of showed them the sites of Bletchley Park, and we got Bletchley Park set up on Twitter and stuff like that. So that was great, kind of connecting social media and Bletchley Park themselves, the management together. And then, so the cats are joining in now as well. And then one night I was on Twitter and I saw that Stephen Fry had tweeted a selfie of himself stuck in a lift in Centre Point. And I saw that and I thought, Stephen Fry, I know he likes technology and history. He must be interested in Bletchley Park. So luckily he was following me on Twitter. And so that meant I could send him several direct messages, which I did. And the next morning, so I was just asking him to help with the campaign. The next morning he tweeted a link to my blog. And instead of getting the usual 50 hits a day on my blog, which I thought was great, I got 8,000 hits just from one tweet from Stephen Fry. And that day I became the most retweeted person in the world on Twitter. So it was just such an incredible difference. And I was kind of learning how to campaign as I went along, I suppose. And, that really kind of showed me that if you find key influential people that care about the same things that you do, you can make a big difference really quickly. And so, the campaign went on for 3 years in total. I think when I started, I thought it would be about 6 months and people will realise we've got to do something and they'll get some money. But actually it was 3 years in the end. And towards the end, I got Google involved. So actually that was through the Turing papers. So during the campaign, some of Alan Turing's papers came up for auction at Christie's. And so there's a guy called Gareth Harther-Crete, who's a journalist, who was trying to raise money so that Bletchley Park could buy the Turing papers. And I think he'd raised about £20,000, but the list price for the papers was, I think, 300 to 500,000. So just a crazy amount of money, right? So not something you'd have in your back pocket. So I thought I've got to do something to try and help Bletchley Park as well to buy the Turing papers. And I was at a talk at Nesta in London, and Megan Smith, who was then a Google VP, was giving a talk. And I just thought, Google, they've got lots of money. Why don't I try approaching Megan and see if she's interested in helping Bletchley Park buy the Turing papers? So I approached her at the end, and she said, send me an email with all the information, and which I did. And then that night, I think someone from Google, a guy called Simon Meacham, got in touch with me through Twitter and said, I've been meaning to get in touch to say I really want to help you with the Bletchley Park campaign. So I told him that I just met Megan Smith, and he said, send me the email that you sent her and I'll get in touch with her as well. And so basically, I think the auction, so that was something like the Thursday, and the next Tuesday, the papers were up for auction. So it was only 5 days before the auction was going to happen. And it was over Thanksgiving as well. And I think it was in 2010. And so Simon and Megan somehow got the Google board to convene over Thanksgiving so that they could give Bletchley Park $100,000 towards purchase of the Turing papers. So that was amazing. And Bletchley Park actually thought it was a scam. They couldn't believe that.
I think I would.
$100,000 from Google. So like phoned me up. I remember where I was sitting and everything when they phoned me up at like 8:00 on that morning saying, "Good, we've just got this email saying Google are giving us $100,000. It's like it's a scam, right?" And I was like, no, it's actually true. It's actually true. So that was funny. And then like the auction was in the afternoon, so I went to the auction and kind of sat there waiting for the lot to come up in the auction at Christie's, and the lot came up, and so I knew that Bletchley Park had about £100,000 basically with all the money that had been raised, and the auctioneer said something like, and the bidding starts at £160,000, and I just thought, oh, so Bletchley Park can't even bid. So after all of that, like exciting, it was like highs and lows over the weekend of getting this money from Google. Would it happen? Wouldn't it happen and stuff? And then at the auction, I just thought they can't even bid, So I was like, oh goodness, what's going to happen now? But actually what happened was not many people bid on the papers. And I think because we've been making such a noise on social media, apparently lots of the people that would have been interested in buying the Turing papers just didn't go for it because they wanted Bletchley Park to get the Turing papers as well. And so what happened was that it didn't meet the reserve price. And then Google, Bletchley Park, I think David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister then, various people worked kind of behind the scenes to raise some more money. I don't know how much money in the end, to buy the Turing papers. And so I think about 3 months later, I was invited up to Bletchley Park when they had a kind of a small reception for the receiving of the Turing papers at Bletchley Park. So that was an amazing event. We just kind of stood around going, oh my goodness, like we helped make this happen. It's so cool. And then, they sort of got pride of place in the Turing exhibition, which is at Bletchley Park now. So I could talk about the campaign forever as well. But it was 3 years, and in the end, it was Google getting involved, and also Bletchley Park applied for funding from Heritage Lottery Fund, and they got 4.1 million in 2011. So then they knew that they'd be okay.
It's so interesting that you talk about the human element, and I had no idea that there were so many women that worked at Bletchley Park. It's absolutely incredible that was just not a known fact for such a long time.
It's got. Well, the thing is, lots of people say Bletchley Park was a victim of its own success. So it was so good at keeping things secret, like everyone that worked there. So there's so many 18-year-old girls, turned up to work at Bletchley, not even really knowing why they were there.
Yeah.
Just having been sort of recommended by their headmaster at school or something, because they were good at mazes or puzzles or doing the Times crossword or something. And so turning up at Bletchley, a railway station, and not even knowing what, why they were there, what was going to happen. Yeah. They just volunteered to help with the war effort, I think. And then having to go and also Jean Valentine, one of the amazing veterans, she said that she turned up at Bletchley Station. She didn't know where she was supposed to go or anything. And then someone at the station said, oh, you go over there, because the old entrance was opposite the station. And so she kind of went over onto the Bletchley Park site, and then was taken straight into a hut where there was a guy behind a desk and a soldier standing in the corner with a gun, and she was told that she had to sign the Official Secrets Act, and she was never allowed to say anything about anything that she was about to do ever to anyone. And so, she was probably scared stiff.
Yeah,
right? And the original NDA.
Kind of gone from school and living in Scotland. She said it's the first time she'd been away from home. To turn up there, you can just imagine how traumatized she must have been. Like signing the Official Secrets Act and then never speaking about it again. So there's just so many incredible stories that and I kind of feel like we've got films like The Imitation Game, which came quite a long time after the end of the campaign, where there's one woman in the whole of Bletchley Park. Yeah. And the story that's told about Turing there is not correct. So it's amazing there's a Hollywood film about Bletchley Park, but, why couldn't you just tell the real story? Because that's great. And we still don't have a film which kind of showcases the women that work there, really, at all, which is mad.
Yeah. So any film producers out there?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
All the
Script
film
writers.
producers that listen to our particular.
Yeah, I'm sure there are lots.
Yeah, there must be loads. Yeah.
I was gonna talk about the movie, because I imagine that even though it doesn't tell the correct story, it does bring a lot of awareness to the place itself.
Completely. So it made a difference for me because, so the campaign ended in 2011. I think that came out in 2015 or something. And so like 3 or 4 years after. And it was quite funny because I knew I knew that was happening kind of when it was happening, because there were thousands of people on Twitter tweeting related to kind of Bletchley Park stuff. We were all tweeting with each other. So if anything happened to do with Bletchley Park across the world, I'd hear about it, or Alan Turing. And at that time, someone, at some point someone said, oh, there's somebody writing a film script, which is going to be a Hollywood film about Alan Turing. So we were like, whoa, that's very exciting. And then to start with, then there was some more news came out. Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be Alan Turing. So we're like, oh, Leonardo. And then it was like, no, Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be Alan Turing. So all these kind of like bits of information coming out over time. And then at some point, someone tweeted saying that they'd just seen someone from the production company at LAX, and they were getting on a flight to London, and they thought that they were coming over to scout for locations to film this film, which we didn't know what it was going to be called at that time, the film about Alan Turing. But they apparently they weren't going to actually to Bletchley Park itself to look at it as a location. So I thought, well, that's ridiculous. They've got to go to Bletchley Park.
Both Joe and I just looked, what?
Well, that's exactly how I felt at the time as well. And so while that guy was on the plane, like we were chatting on Twitter, basically, hundreds of people probably. And so we all kind of like Twitter bombed him, or I don't even know what you call it, but, like tweeted him saying, you've got to go to Bletchley Park, like you've got to visit Bletchley Park. And so, the account, which was, I think, Black Bear Productions, never replied to any of our tweets, but I hope that we made the difference. But so they did go to Bletchley Park and have a look. And in the end, they did use Bletchley Park for the scenes in the bar, which is the ballroom at Bletchley Park. So they did use Bletchley Park. And, so Bletchley Park was in it. But apparently the stately home that they used for Bletchley Park, for the Mansion House building at Bletchley Park, which wasn't at Bletchley Park, they said that they used that place because the Mansion House at Bletchley Park didn't look enough like Bletchley Park for the film. So all I can think of is that, I guess the film is mainly for American audiences because there's so many more people in the States than in the UK. And maybe it didn't look like an American's idea of Bletchley Park. I don't really know. I always thought that was a bit confusing.
Yeah.
But at least some of it was filmed at Bletchley Park in the end, so that was good.
Yeah, I'm sure maybe there was some logic there at some point, but I can't quite see it now. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting to us today, Sue. It's been
you're very welcome.
So interesting. There are so many different elements to your career. I could honestly just talk to you all day about them.
Yes.
I'll come back.
Yeah, please do. Part 2.
Please do, yes.
So I suppose for people that are interested in finding out more about you, where can they find you? It seems you're very active on Twitter.
So at Dr. Black on Twitter, sueblack.co.uk. Then I'm at Durham University. So if you Google Durham Sue Black, you'll be able to find me. And it's quite funny because there's another Sue Black who's my friend, who's like a famous forensic anthropologist. So we get mistaken for each other all the time. So I'm the Sue Black at Durham and she's at Lancaster. So don't get confused. And I think if you Google Sue Black, you'll get one or other of us, and then you have to work out that I'm the one who's computer science. Yeah. We've both got red hair as well, so it's quite funny.
I was going to say, good thing that you don't both work in the same field. That would be so much more confusing.
Yeah, no, I know, but we're both in science, right? We're both in STEM, so it's close enough that we get confused with each other all the time. It's quite funny. We met up a couple of years ago, and I've got a great photo with her, which I'll tweet when this comes out. because she's so cool.
Great. I like the idea of a kind of Sue Black fest.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you again. And yeah, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If you have an interesting topic you'd like featured on the show, a guest recommendation or a burning question, email podcast@turing.ac.uk.
The Turing podcast is hosted by Ed Cowstry, B. Costa Gomez and Joe Dungate, and produced by Dan Whitfield for the Alan Turing Institute.
Music for the podcast was provided by Jam and Sun. You can check out his latest releases at jamandsun.bandcamp.com.